Hi, I'm Victor Margiotta, and this is the Community Show. Thanks for watching. I am so lucky and blessed and honored to have Jeanette Gisbert on the show. We're going to talk about connections. The connection is Chuck Newman introduced me to Jeanette, said, you got to get her on the show. She's the executive director of Volunteer New York. And we're going to talk about where she went to school and her journey to be the director and all the wonderful people she's met and worked with, and just excited to talk to her. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Victor. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it really is an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll start off with, let's talk about Chuck Newman.
Yeah. So Chuck, I love how many people know Chuck. We're really fortunate at Volunteer New York that Chuck is a board member.
Awesome.
He also does our insurance and our benefits, so we get a twofer that way. But when he's always such an ambassador for community, an ambassador for Volunteer New York, and he reached out to let me know that he had been on your show a little while ago, and I always welcome the opportunity to introduce more people to Volunteer New York, so that we can just get our name out there and make it easier for more people to volunteer.
Yeah, and we got to thank James Brooks for orchestrating and keeping this show going, because if it wasn't for him and Joe Pisano, it would be impossible. I mean, I'm just the guy, but they're the man.
You need the behind the camera expertise for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny how you guys connected.
I know. You know what? It's like we were saying a little while ago. You just always wear clean underwear. You never know where you're going to meet folks. But that's the one of the things that we're going to talk about today is connections and community. And at Volunteer New York, we believe that volunteerism is a strategy for building community and connections. Our tagline is Connect, Serve, Grow.
Yes.
But it's always a real pleasure when you're chatting with folks and you can find those dots and those Venn diagrams where people come together, because I think it's a reminder that we may feel different and we may seem different from each other sometimes, but the reality is that we're all human beings.
Yes, it's true. And talk about connections. Chuck has been coming to the Paradise forever. His father had a boatyard right down the street, and I've never met him. I saw him on the Cortland magazine. I called him up. I said, look, I have a local cable access show. You're like Superman. I got to get you on the show.
He's figured out the cloning mechanism. We joke at Volunteer New York that the way that we can do more is that we have to figure out the cloning mechanism so that there could just be more of us. Yeah. But Chuck has actually figured it out.
Yeah, he is unbelievable.
I'm waiting for him to tell us his secret.
Yeah. Let's talk about power. I want to talk a little bit about girl power. And, I want you to help inspire young women to go for their dreams. So just talk a little bit about you growing up.
Yeah. That's a tall order. Oh my gosh. I'm happy. Thank you for that opportunity. So I grew up here in Westchester. My parents are Cuban immigrants. I'm a first generation Cuban American. And, my mom came here when she was 13. My mom older, my dad older, they met here.
Okay.
And, for us, for me, for my siblings, for my cousins, it was very clear that school, getting a good education was our priority. And so that's always been a focus of mine. I went to the local Catholic school. We were just chatting about, the joys of going to school with the same 14 people for your entire life. Yep, been there.
I'm still best friends with my best friend from first grade. Hi, Pat.
Okay, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can say that. It was lovely, but it was not quite the same experience.
Yeah.
And then I went to the Ursuline School, which is an all-girls high school grounded in service and female empowerment. And then I went to school in Boston, to Boston College, where I majored in management, and I majored in accounting, actually, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in the business. I thought I wanted to do something in business. And I thought, well, whether you're making money or losing money, someone's got to count it. So I'll do that. But, for me, it was just really kind of knowing that, prioritizing education would lead to options, and that if I had options, I would always have choices. And I think that that's an important message for anyone to hear. Is it's a message I share with my son about, just always making sure that you're building those relationships, that you're not burning any bridges, that you're giving yourself options and as many opportunities as you can, kind of no matter where you are. But yeah, and then, I went to work for a big accounting firm, which back then was like the coveted job. I was an auditor, and I was working with mostly financial services companies, mutual funds, credit unions. And for me, the turning point was I was at a small credit union in like Podunk, Massachusetts, auditing a teller's drawer, and I shut down the teller. I take her drawer. I'm counting money. I'm chatting with her. I finish up. I give her back her drawer, and she says to me, "Wow, Jeanette, you're really nice for an auditor." And I remember thinking, like, that's just not the contribution I'm looking to make to the world. But, we're talking about kind of inspiration, and I think for me, inspiration also is really grounded in being brave. I looked at myself and I said, here I have a whole, family's set of expectations and hopes and dreams on my shoulder, right? Like I'm gonna go and be this auditor and this accountant and a partner. And I looked in that moment and I said, this is not the path for me. And so how do I find that path, and how do I find that inner courage to follow the path that I know will ultimately make me happy and also make the world a better place? And so that's when I learned about AmeriCorps, which is often described as the domestic version of the Peace Corps. And I did that for a year and really learned about the nonprofit sector doing that. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. So what was the next job?
So after AmeriCorps, I actually decided to come home, and I went to work for an organization called New York Cares. So for me, the nonprofit sector was fascinating because I thought, like, here are all of these businesses, basically small businesses that are in the business of helping others. And I loved that idea. But my challenge when I was getting to the end of my AmeriCorps year was there wasn't one like specific issue area that was bubbling up for me. I'm a woman. I'm a Latina. I'm a first generation immigrant. There are lots of organizations that I could have been like, oh, I want to really work with that group. And nothing really kind of was landing for me. But this idea of volunteerism, this idea of community, what I experienced through my year of service as an AmeriCorps member is that every single one of those organizations needed volunteers in order to accomplish their mission.
Of course.
And that was really powerful to me. And so I was like, well, who does that? Like, where are the nonprofits that make it easy for people to volunteer? And that's when I learned about New York Cares, which is a connector organization in the city. That's when I learned about this broader network of nonprofits around the world, all under the umbrella of another nonprofit called Points of Light that are in the business of making it easy for people to volunteer. I actually did learn about Volunteer New York way back then, but I was really excited about the idea of going into the city and like working in the city. But after 7 years there, I was ready for something new, and that's when I joined Volunteer New York.
Yeah. Now you were a director of volunteer relations responsible for the recruitment and management of thousands of volunteers.
Yep, at New York Cares. So that was actually a really cool, and I'm like geeking out, job because at that point, New York Cares did not have anyone who was really thinking strategically about how they were getting more volunteers into their pipeline, training them, and the kind of experience and impact that they were having once they were out volunteering. And they knew that in order to grow, they needed to think about it a little bit more of a pipeline.
Yeah.
We at Volunteer New York, we say volunteers are priceless, but they're not free. They're like every other kind of human capital that has to be managed and engaged. And so I was the first director of volunteer relations at New York Cares, and really just kind of had an opportunity to think about how are we training our volunteer leaders? How are we
right.
getting the word out there? How are we training our volunteers so that they can be thoughtful and engaging participants in the community?
Yes.
So that was really great. And then when I came to New York to volunteer New York, I was brought on to actually build its first ever corporate program. Because as we do now, so many businesses see the value of engaging their employees in volunteerism. And so they were coming to Volunteer New York to say, can you help me? But they just didn't have the bandwidth to do that.
Yeah.
So they brought me on to kind of help that, start that program. And here I am, never left.
Awesome. How can we get people to volunteer? Let's tell them. You know, I always said people want to volunteer. It's almost like you have to take them by the hand and say, okay, this is what you do. But they want to do it.
Yep. So it's so interesting you mentioned that, because I think it's been I guess it's been 2 years now. Points of Light, this umbrella organization that I mentioned, one of the things that they do is national surveys and research about volunteerism.
Yeah.
And a survey that they did about 2 years ago found that 44% of survey respondents said they didn't volunteer because they don't know where to get started.
Right.
And honestly, Victor, I'm not going to lie. Like, I found it hard to believe. I'm like, in this information-rich world,
just Google.
How is it that people are not finding ways to volunteer? And I think that the way I interpreted that statement is, it's almost too much. Like, you Google volunteerism and lots of options come up, but how do you know that that volunteer role is going to make a difference? How do you know that it's with an organization that is credible?
Yeah.
How do you know that it's an organization that's going to call you back? Those kinds of things. And so I think what makes Volunteer New York unique, and especially to have an organization like us here in Westchester, and we serve Westchester, Putnam, and Rockland, is we are that organization. We're the organization that, we have a team of professionals that are out in our community every day talking to other nonprofits about how volunteer power can help those organizations achieve, meet their mission and achieve their vision. And I think that's really special and really creates, one of the things that we're starting to talk a lot about at Volunteer New York is, how do we create the pathways that convert good intentions into action? Because to your point, sometimes people need that nudge.
Yeah.
They need that understanding that they're going to make a difference. They need that understanding of, why you want me to serve at a food pantry or soup kitchen, but what do you mean there's hunger and insecurity in Westchester? They need education to understand why they need to serve. And that's what we do.
Well, there's so many benefits to volunteering too. It helps create your mental and your physical and, bonds with people. Talk about after the pandemic, how important that is for people now.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking a lot about this at Volunteer New York lately, about relationships. And at Volunteer New York, we have 2 values and 3 beliefs that we talk a lot about. We value community, we value volunteerism, and we believe everyone can serve, that volunteering is transformational, and that relationships matter. Yes. And we said that before the pandemic. So now, as people are kind of emerging, from the pandemic, I think that, and I was just listening to a podcast on the way here describing how a lot of people aren't okay, Victor, right? They're not, let's just name it. Yeah. And they're not okay because they've experienced the pandemic in a variety of ways, right? They've perhaps, the most devastating is experienced a loss of a loved one. And, on the other end, maybe they've just been isolated, they've been isolated in their home for how long? And both of those impact relationships. They impact connections. And I think human beings are naturally kind of social beings, even introverts like me, but we crave those connections, and the pandemic affected all of that. And we believe at Volunteer New York that we have an opportunity to elevate the role that volunteerism and getting off your couch or getting out of your house and connecting to your community through volunteerism, through service, can be a really powerful strategy to starting to rebuild those relationships.
What's involved in the volunteer training? Now, how do you pick? I mean, obviously, I'm a cook, so I could easily slide into the role as, helping out in the kitchen or serving people.
Yeah.
How do you help them pick what they're going to do, and then what is the training involved?
Yeah, it's a great question. So most of what we do at Volunteer New York is we're connecting you and others to other nonprofit organizations.
Okay.
And so people can come to volunteernewyork.org, or they can call us. We have someone that will actually answer the phone. But if you go online, you can create a profile, and then you can search the database by skills, interests, geography, availability. And if it feels overwhelming, then you can call us and we'll ask you those questions and we'll offer up some suggestions. So the training piece really comes once you've connected with the nonprofit where you're going to be doing your service. And then whatever volunteer requirements they have, you'll kind of go through those, walk through those steps. But to connect to Volunteer New York, it's as easy as calling us or going online and creating a profile. We call it expressing interest in an opportunity. Like you click a button and then that nonprofit gets an email that says, James has expressed an interest in your opportunity. Here's his contact information. Please reach out to him. Yeah. There are some, I will say we do have some programs. We have a board training and matching program. So nonprofit board service is something we get asked a lot about because every nonprofit organization has a board of directors and all of those are volunteers, right? And so we do offer some training. We have a program where the program itself is training, trying to inform individuals about what it means to be a board member, and then we'll connect people to organizations that we know are actively looking for board members.
Yes. So I had some time, and I went up to the church to volunteer.
Yeah.
And of course,
Awesome.
I mean, they have a list about a mile long.
Always be careful what you wish for.
So, but it was an opportunity, and for service, for one, I love working by myself, so they gave me the opportunity to clean and straighten out, and for me it's a great thing because I love my church.
Yep.
And I love the people that are there. Talk about your faith and how important it is growing up in the Catholic religion.
Sure. I think for me, what I'm grateful for is having had a foundation in something. Yeah. And I think that that's actually something I've tried to carry on to my son. I think that I have strong opinions about the institution, whatever we could put that over here. Yep. But for me personally, I think it's important to have a belief in something.
Yes.
And we can you can call it whatever it is that you'd like to call it, for as far as I'm concerned. But I think that is important, and that is something that that kind of faith foundation is something that I am grateful for. And I think that especially in challenging times, it provides the roots, it provides kind of the grounding that is so often necessary to weather challenging times. And I would argue, not so dissimilar from the roots that are established by serving your community.
Yeah.
And those connections that you build, I think are also really important.
Yeah. Now you went to Baruch.
Yeah.
I know. My niece, Amanda, is actually going there now.
I love it.
She's wonderful. She's such, a great kid. She works
what is
here.
she studying?
She probably told me like 5 times.
All right,
But,
Amanda, you
yeah.
gotta tell
Well,
Uncle Victor again.
Well, some kind of management.
Okay.
But tell us about your experience down there.
Yeah. So I received my undergraduate in business management, which is probably, I'm going to tell you, is probably what she studied.
I think
just
so.
so you know.
Yep.
And when I had spent enough time in the nonprofit sector, I realized that I really wanted to learn more about nonprofit business and leadership. And I decided that it was time to kind of pursue a master's degree. And within the nonprofit space, there is a degree called a master's in public administration. So it's kind of like like an MBA, but for the nonprofit sector.
Yeah.
And I thought about getting my MBA, but I was like, I already taken all of these business courses, and I really wanted to grow and learn something different. So Baruch actually has a really tremendous nonprofit program, an amazing master's in public administration program. It was walking distance to where I was at New York Cares. I knew, this is actually good advice for those, future women leaders.
Yes.
I knew that I wanted to stay in the nonprofit sector and probably would never make the kind of salary ranges that you do when you go work for the for-profit sector, which we can talk about that in another soapbox, but that's just the way it is. And so I didn't want to incur a lot of student loans. I wanted to figure out a way to pay for it. NYU, Columbia, they each also have MPA programs. But you can't beat the CUNY and the SUNY kind of value. And I knew that I was going to stay in New York, and Baruch is a well-known name.
Yes.
And I loved it. I mean, it was hard. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I would work all day and then walk over to 23rd and Lex and, be in classes until 9, 10 o'clock and then take a train up to Hartsdale where I was living at the time. Wow. But I learned a lot. And it really helped kind of elevate my my understanding of what it meant to run a nonprofit organization and just to be a better leader.
Yeah.
It was super fun.
So how is your role as a mom?
Oh my gosh. This is my role as a mom. I mean, my son is one of my greatest gifts. I'm not going to lie. I have all of these kind of weird medical vascular anomalies, and so there was a time where I didn't know if that was going to be in the cards for me. But he's great, but being a parent is. I mean, it's no joke, Peter. It's no joke.
No.
It's like being a parent in the 21st century these days is it's all of it. It's the technology, it's the video gaming, it's the keeping them, resilient and, emotionally aware and whatnot. But he's great. He's finishing up 8th grade. He's a scout. He's very, very determined to be an Eagle Scout. Now I've said it on camera, Aaron. Now you've got to do it. He does karate. He loves his karate. He does a group called Destination Imagination, where kids come together with this challenge. They have to build and write and create, and he loves it. He's
into investing. Talk about that.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. So one of the things that we talked about, that I wanted to introduce him to is just this idea of not being afraid to talk about money. And maybe it's culturally for me, but growing up, we didn't really talk about those things. And I think we do a disservice to our young people not to talk about, just budgeting and how to balance a checkbook and investing is part of that as well. So, so this year, last year, he, was kind of starting to ask some questions about how it works. And he knew that I had set aside some money, some birthday money. And so he asked for a little bit of it. And now he's looks at the S&P 500 every other day. I don't know. I can't watch.
Yeah, I can't either. My investments were up here and now they're down here. But so give us some advice for kids, especially young women, about getting a career and being on their own.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, finding something that you're passionate about, finding something that you really feel like you can kind of make a contribution in is so important. And, I've been really grateful to have, I feel, kind of found that, even
Yeah.
though I continue to learn and grow, every day. I think that's an important characteristic of a leader is someone who has enough humility to kind of know that they don't know everything, but also enough kind of grace under fire, if you will, to kind of provide stability for the team.
Yeah.
I think the nonprofit sector is such a rich place, and I feel really fortunate to be at a nonprofit organization that is in the business of helping every other nonprofit organization ensure that it has the people power, the volunteer power that it needs to accomplish their mission. I feel pretty lucky.
You are blessed, and I'm so blessed to have met you. But you said when you were young, you lived right down the street from the library.
Yeah.
How important was that for you?
You know what? I love libraries, Victor. To me, these libraries were this like magical, quiet, text-rich, obviously, places. And, I would go there to do my homework. I would go there to do research papers. I remember when I got old enough and I could drive, and I would drive from Tarrytown to Greenburgh, because Greenburgh had the big library where you could find things on microfiche. Yeah. And that was like how you got your research papers to be like the next level, was like the different, references that you could make.
Yeah.
So, I just think that they are, and maybe I didn't know it then, but they are these places that bring community together. And so it always kind of spoke to me, right? This concept of how do you bring people together? I think libraries do that. And certainly the work that we do at Volunteer New York does that too, with bringing people together to serve. During the start of COVID, libraries became this incredible hub of information. And then, and during Hurricane Sandy, way back when nobody had power, people were going to libraries. I mean, over and over again, you see examples of where they become these hubs of community.
Right.
I don't know. I just thought about that now. Maybe that's why I've always been attracted to them, because I've always been attracted to this concept of community and the mechanism that brings people together.
There you go. And that's what volunteering is all about.
Yep.
Finding yourself, finding what, it's a career booster too, because you get to meet people, the connections you make.
Yeah.
So
we actually used to have a presentation that talked all about why people should volunteer when they're in between jobs.
All right, let's watch that. So I'm so glad you came on.
I'm so happy I did too. This was a real pleasure.
It's funny because I've never met you before, but I feel like I've known you forever.
Now I'm coming back to the restaurant.
Now you have
never
to come
to the restaurant.
Oh, that's funny. I had Matt Galata on the show. Hi, Matt. And he does Galata House.
Yes,
and,
another great nonprofit organization.
And he was just in for dinner the other day.
I love it.
So I'm attracting customers too. So
you can write this off as part of your marketing budget.
Exactly. So eat at the Paradise. But thanks so much for coming on. And get out there, volunteer, click on Volunteer New York, find out what you're good at, go and help an organization. Don't complain about what's going on. Do something about it. Make a difference. That's what this world is all about, getting out of yourself and doing something. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for